Hello and welcome to this Food Safety Essentials webinar. My name is Simon Timpley from the International Food Safety and Quality Network. And today's guest, every time we run these monthly, is Tony Connor. We're going to be talking about the most common SQF certification audit non-conformances today. So great to have you along, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Simon. Fine, thank you. Sun shining, so we got to be happy. Small mercy.
Good, yeah, exactly. And we've got a decent amount registered for today, 1,280. We've got over 200 online live with us right now, and it's growing by the second, so looking forward to it. Okay, so I'll be back for the Q&A in a bit, but let's get the slides up. Okay.
All right, so welcome to our fourth Food Safety Essentials session, and today I'm going to talk a bit about non-conformances from SQF audits, and I'll also mention a couple of other GFSI benchmark standards. So the idea behind Food Safety Essentials is really a general Q&A on food safety, and we'll come on to that later. But we'll first have a bit of a presentation on non-conformances from SQF certification audits. So most of the data we've got is 2021-22. We're lacking 23, and we've got some from 24. But let's have a look through, because it is of interest. So 2021, critical non-conformances. We had two from section internal audits and inspections, management responsibility, food safety legislation, food safety plan, three there from different sections, including the 12 steps as per Codex Alimentarius, HACCP guidelines, principles of HACCP, requirements to determine and document control measures, and monitoring, correction, action, and verification records. There are issues with corrective and preventive action records, one allergen management, and a good manufacturing practice, building materials, critical non-conformance. In 2022, there were double the amount of non-conformances, several from pest prevention. So 6 here. Pest activity risk shall be analysed and recorded. Products, materials, packaging that are found to be contaminated should be disposed of, and the source of infestation investigated and resolved, and the requirement for a pest prevention program. Some more food safety plans. The team need to identify steps in the process which must be applied to eliminate a significant hazard, management responsibility. And 3 more food safety plans. The team need to identify and document limits, develop and document procedures for monitoring, and the plan should be implemented in full. If we look at the top 5 major non-conformances from each year, there was 2021 internal audits and inspections, management responsibility with the requirement to lead and support a food culture, cleaning, sanitation, food safety plan again, corrective and preventive action. And from 2022, internal audits and inspections again, cleaning and sanitation, pest prevention again, and food safety plan. If we look at the top 10 minor non-conformances, they include hygiene requirements and staff engaged in food handling, food defense, clean sanitation, equipment, food safety plan, product identification, records, management review, building materials, equipment. And 22 minors, clean and sanitation, equipment, building materials, again, staff hygiene, management review, dust, insect and pest proofing, food safety plan, 2 food defense plans, internal audits and inspections. This is data from 2024 where the main non-conformance was senior management review, where the SQF system needs to be reviewed by senior management at least annually and include various items, including changes, food safety culture, objectives, performance measurement, corrective and preventive actions. I'll come back to this with more details of the others. The statistics for Edition 9 audits were that there was 0.16% of audits got a critical non-conformance. 1 in 9.73% of audits got major non-conformances, and all the audits got equivalent to 4.67 minor non-conformances per audit. If you look at a table of the previous 2021 and 22 non-conformances, it's a bit easier to see where the major issues are. So looking at this, we have quite obviously management responsibility with some, food legislation with one, food safety plan with quite a lot of critical non-conformances and some major, a couple of corrective action and preventive actions, then internal audits and inspections, only one allergen management, which I'll come on to later, quite a few pest prevention, one building, and some cleaning and sanitation. These were the minor non-conformances from certification audits in 2021 and 22, which include management review, food safety plan, internal audits, defence plan, building materials, proofing, cleaning and sanitation, product identification. These are the top non-conformances from certification audits in 2024. I've already mentioned management responsibility. There was also management review, issues with records, issues with walls, partitions, ceilings and doors, issues with dust, insect and pest proofing, issues with ventilation, issues with equipment and utensils needing to be designed, constructed and operated and maintained in a hygienic manner, and cleaning and sanitation issues, and then issues with staff engaged in food handling and processing operations, which is usually hygiene. Excuse me. Out of interest, I think it's. I thought I'd look or show you some non-conformities that come from FSSC 22000, and the main non-conformities are physical contamination, preventive and corrective maintenance, traceability, structure and fittings, control of measuring and monitoring, competence of staff, storage issues, environmental monitoring, cleaning and sanitizing, and control of externally provided processes, products or services. Some information provided by LRQA, where Lloyd's experts have identified the top 5 non-conformities identified during BRCGS food safety audits from 2019 to 2023. Clause 4.6.1, all equipment shall be constructed of appropriate materials. The design and placement of equipment shall ensure it's effectively cleaned and maintained. This had 454 non-conformances. Next, the premises and equipment needed to be maintained in a clean and hygienic condition, 430 non-conformances. Next, sites management need to define and maintain a clear plan for developing, continue an improvement of a food safety and quality culture. 296 non-conformances against that one. Next, the food safety team need to identify and record all potential hazards, etc. this had 296 non-conformances. So again, food safety plan related. And lastly, doors need to be maintained in a good condition. So proofing, and this one was 283 non-conformances. So that information was from LRQA. Some final thoughts on this. There were comments that micro and allergen labeling are major contributors to product recalls, but are not major contributors to non-conformances and SQF audits. This seems to indicate they should be an area for greater focus in future audits. There are also indications that there should be a greater focus on new product development in certification audits, and sites need to fully justify if not new product development is regarded as not applicable. So these areas, environmental monitoring, I've been talking about for quite a while. These are sources of information. I can post the links in a bit, or we can post a copy of the presentation. So these are sources of information from the webinar. So out of 771 FDA recalls, 46.4% are due to undeclared allergens or labeling. So in that data, we only saw one non-conformance due to allergen management, and clearly should be more based on what we see in recalls. And also, out of 771 recalls, 29.3% were due to environmental pathogens, Salmonella and Listeria monocytogenes. So again, this is something we should see more in certification audits. Over 75% of recalls are due to problems caused by either labeling, undeclared allergens, or by product contamination with well-known environmental pathogens, Salmonella and Listeria. You can see more information on those in our previous webinars, which are on the forums. 2024, we focused on environmental pathogens. November 2024, and in December, labeling and undeclared allergens. So now we'll throw it open to question and answers if you've got any, or we can regarding non-conformances, and if you haven't got any regarding those, we can throw it open to general question and answers on food safety.
Yeah. There are none in the Q&A tab, but yeah, if you do have a question, please do ask.
I'll just dig out the.
One thing while you do, Beverly and everybody is being recorded today, and we'll follow up to everybody that registered today, whether you join live or join the recorded. You'll get a copy of the slides, the recording, and also a certificate. So yeah, don't worry. But yeah, if you have any questions, please ask.
The links to sources of information are there, but it'll also be in the chat on the forums, I assume, when it goes online. Yes, it will indeed. Question. Well, a question from Bianca: does SQF require an X-ray? It doesn't stipulate. It doesn't stipulate that it's compulsory, but what you need to do is ensure you've got adequate controls in place to remove or detect and remove foreign bodies. Okay, and actually, Amanjot did actually reply, no, SQF does not require an X-ray. It's a Costco requirement. So, yes, Costco are some company that are causing quite an aggravation with a lot of suppliers because of their stipulation on that. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Fernando is asking, any recalls due to contamination due to compressed gases?
Not that I'm aware of, no. They're due to environmental contamination, typically from contact fluids or food safety surfaces. Food contact surfaces, not food safety surfaces. None that I'm aware of, but they don't, in the FDA data, it doesn't specifically state where the contamination came from.
Okay. Question from Baruch. Does any standard require that you trend your non-conformances?
Well, they would require that from a management review. So you analyze and look at during all food safety standards tend to require management review, and during management review you normally look at internal audits, secondary audits, which might be suppliers, and third-party audits, and you look at trends, tend to look at trends there, rather in a management review you haven't got time to go through all the non-conformances from audits, so you generally look at trends and performance. So sometimes you might say not just look at non-conformance, but you might look at your audit scores, and then if there's a poor score, delve deeper into that. So yes, but tends to be a management review.
Okay. Question from Clifford. Why is it that there are so many recalls due to allergen issues, however only one non-conformance raised during the certification audit?
That is the point I made exactly, Clifford. So thank you for emphasising it.
Okay, so it's not a question. Question from Barb. Is missing environmental testing a minor or major non-conformance?
Well, I'd say it would. I think it would depend on your product. If you're making packaging, it might be considered less serious. If you're making a ready-to-eat product that can be contaminated by an environmental pathogen, so chocolate, salmonella, cooked meats, listeria, then it's a major or it could be regarded as a critical.
Okay, thanks. For anybody asking a question, can you mark it as a question when you're posting it so that it goes into the Q&A stream? It will help. Okay, a question from Mitchell. Is SQF moving from HACCP to HARPC anytime soon?
It will be based on SQF does two things that are relevant here. It says it needs your food safety system needs to be based on legislative requirements, so it needs to reflect that HARPC. But it also stipulates, as does the GFSI benchmark, that it should be as the 12 steps of HACCP as defined in Codex Alimentarius, General Principles of Food Hygiene, HACCP guidelines.
Okay, question from Stephanie. Could you discuss version 10 of the codes? Do you know anything about it at the moment?
I think there will be greater emphasis on some areas I've identified, equipment, specifying equipment, food safety culture, developments in terms of those. Hopefully some strategy to tackle the issues we've highlighted, as Clifford, as I've shown in the presentation, Clifford has mentioned. So there might be areas they look at, which say in BRC there are more stipulations or specific requirements for product labeling. So there may be areas to address there, and that new product development needs to be addressed and not considered not applicable in many cases, because New product labels, product labels are usually developed from the new product development process, and that's when they need to be checked to ensure they're correct, and they advise of the correct allergens. But not only that, when products are developed, that new allergens are not introduced to site, where you're not actually handling those allergens.
Okay, got you. Question from Patty. What is the requirement for backflow testing for non-food contact packaging?
This is SQF requirement for backflow testing. I'd have to check the standard for packaging, because I couldn't be 100% sure it's a requirement, but normally it's a requirement to check periodically to prevent that backflow is prevented.
Okay. Question from Tamalika. What are the possible NCs about food safety culture?
Well, senior management haven't set food safety objectives, that there's no communicate on site, that there's poor communication on site, that it's quite obvious from housekeeping and hygiene audits that there isn't a culture on that, and from external audits from the auditor visiting, can interview staff and ask them. A lack of interaction with staff, periodic surveys of staff, suggestion boxes, employee reward schemes. So it's more likely to be a global thing than anything that an auditor gets a sense of, that that the site hasn't really taken on board the idea of having a food safety culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Amanjot, what are the common tests we require for swab testing after cleaning and sanitation, and what are the ranges?
Yeah, well, normally it varies with product, and you need to establish what's an acceptable cleaning performance by carrying out cleaning, do your micro swabbing, so typically TVC, yeast and molds, Enterobacteriaceae. Establish what an acceptable level of those, and what are the ranges. Now, if you were asking me offhand what was typically acceptable, I would say for a clean food contact surface, I would say something less than 1,000 for TVC, less than 100 or less than 50 for yeast and molds, and less than, let's say, less than 10 for Enterobacteriaceae. But having said that, it also depends on whether your product's raw or ready to eat, and how that cleaning performance reflects on the product performance. So when you validate cleaning and sanitation procedures, you need to test the product and make sure that your validated cleaning performance produces a sound product that is acceptable microbiologically.
Okay, thanks. Question from Manny Cantor. What are Costco requirements for finished product testing?
I'm not talking about Costco requirements today. There's a Costco standard. You know, it's like typically your standard require just generally standards require you to test that product meets legislative requirements. So normally you would test chemical and microbiological standards or levels as specified for your product. The number one would be as per legislation, and secondly, it might be quality. So Costco might have their own requirements regarding quality, but that would be what they would normally expect you to test, but it's not a Costco session. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Question from Buenaventura. If customer complaint is still open, that is 30 days old during an audit, would that be considered a non-conformance?
It could be considered a bit slow anyway, but I would be, if I as an auditor would be looking if for the reason why the complaint hadn't been closed out, and it might be still investigated. You might have taken time to get a sample. You might have sent a sample off to a laboratory to be analysed. Yeah. So it depends, but it is a bit slow. But would I raise a non-conformance based on one complaint being 30 days? No. If there was 10, then, or 20, then maybe, yeah.
Okay, fair. Question from Alkesh. What are the common pathogens required to be tested as part of environmental monitoring plan?
Right, I've already mentioned them. The main ones are in wet environments are Listeria monocytogenes, and the ones, so that's for like ready meals, cooked meats, and then the Salmonella for dry product environments, such as powders, chocolate, peanut butter, which is a famous one that we've had lots of recalls in the past because of Salmonella contamination in peanut butter.
Okay, got you. Question from Dr. Abil Ashar. Could you provide more details on non-conformances from management review?
Okay, well, your management review needs to review the whole performance of your food safety management system. It needs to review any changes in management. It needs to review any changes on site. So that might be changes to process, changes to equipment. It needs to review internal audits, secondary audits, which are supplier audits, external audits, such as certification audits. It needs to review corrective actions, preventive actions, food safety plans, food defense plans, food fraud plans, outstanding non-conformances, and I think I'm running out of things to review.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good list. Right. Question from Dr. H.J. Shankaralinge. Hope I got that right. What is the best control measure for air pathogens in food industry?
It would depend on what the pathogen was and the application, but I mean you can use irradiation, you can use hydrogen peroxide in machines, you can use UV light. So I mean, when there's a problem and you need to protect the product from the air, usually you have filtration to a certain level. You might have a sterile air chamber in which the product's packaged. So it depends on the product, but ozone, peroxide, UV could be irradiation, I guess. Filtration. Yeah, HEPA filters.
Okay.
Yeah.
Manikanta is asking, do we need to test for indicator organisms in zone 2 of environmental monitoring?
Well, I think indicator organisms are, for environmental monitoring are a good idea because they're much cheaper than pathogen testing. So I would set up a environmental monitoring system where the bulk of the samples you're taking are using indicator organisms, yeast and molds, TVC, Enterobacteriaceae, and then you back those up with pathogen sampling of pathogens. So it just allows you to cover a larger sampling area, more sites, but within a reasonable cost rather than doing all pathogen sampling.
Okay. Question from Bernard. listeria can come with the product itself. Think fish, salmon, smoked salmon. Same for. Oh, it's not a question, that is it? I think it's an explanation.
Right.
Question from Crystal. How and where can we see the next edition? I know you mentioned what might be in it. When might we see it?
Yeah, it's being developed currently, and I think it's open for comments from next month, and it's due to be published shortly after that. So it's in the next few months. I think it was July, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, question from Mohammed. What are the actual differences between HACCP and FSSC 22000?
Okay, well, HACCP is obviously a system for identifying hazards and controlling them. FSSC 22000 is a whole certification scheme, but it is based on the requirements of ISO 22000 requirements for food safety management system. Now, in that standard, there is a requirement to have determine critical control points, operational prerequisite programs, and prerequisite programs. So that's the main difference between that scheme, FSSC 22000, and HACCP as per Codex Alimentarius. There's a requirement to decide on whether control measures are going to be implemented as operational prerequisite programs or at critical control points. And that's a distinct difference between that scheme and any other.
Okay, thanks. Teresa, when will we be required to comply with the new code requirements? Well, I suppose when the new updated code comes out.
Yeah, I think it's January 2026, but it's usually
it's already known.
I think so. Yeah, it's 6 months after the publication, so it's around then.
Right. Okay. Question from Siddhartha. Is there any current change in HACCP methodology?
The most recent changes were in 2022, and where there was a requirement to validate critical limits and validate the HACCP plan as well as verification. So it's in the latest version. The current is the latest version of Codex Alimentarius, General Principles of Food Hygiene, which contains guidelines for HACCP application and the 12 steps.
Okay. Question from Abigail. For FSSC 22000, does the HACCP analysis sheet need to be categorized by hazard or by process step, or does it matter?
Okay, well, when you do a hazard analysis, what you do before that is you do a process flow diagram with the steps in your process from supplier to customer through goods in, storage, processing, etc. So those steps, you need to look at those steps and decide which hazards are associated with each step. So I would always start with the step and look at the hazards. Okay. And then you look at the hazards, categorize the hazard and decide what it is. So step, I'm buying in peanuts and the hazard is biological. It's and salmonella, and that's what I want to control, if that makes sense.
Okay. Question from Alan, bit of a long one. Hi, received a non-conformance in recent BRC audit for recall exercise not completed within the given time frame, 4 hours in recall SOP. One customer came back with a response outside time frame, nothing clearly stated here in the relevant BRC clause in version 9, but is the essential thing here the customer acknowledged the recall within the time frame as opposed to having all the results of the stock to be recalled?
Right. Well, I think it seems a bit harsh if it was only one customer that came back outside of the time frame. But I'm not sure why you would need a response from the customer to actually do a recall or practice a recall, because you've contacted the customer, you've sent them an email, you've tried to phone them, okay, but what you need is a traceability inside that for 4 hours. So you need to know what raw materials went in, all the product processing, manufacturing, labeling details, and how much of each product went to the customer. So I don't see how you can get a non-conformance for that if on a mock recall the customer hasn't answered the phone or hasn't come back to you within 4 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Rex. How do you manage NCs arising from management responsibilities?
Well, the senior management and site senior management should be addressing these. So it depends what the responsibilities are and what the issues are. So I mean, if it's there isn't a policy or objectives, then it's quite obvious that it's senior management that are responsible for doing that. And I know people do have issues, particularly smaller sites, getting senior management on board, but management responsibilities really needs to be site management need to be dealing with those.
Okay, question from Bernard. When no lab tests on PFAS in animal products, legal. Sorry, that's not a question. No. Please don't put questions, non-questions in the questions and questions in the normal chat. Helpful, please. Question from Fernando. What is the difference between SQF and SQF quality audits?
Right. Well, standard SQF audits are food safety based and based on the SQF food safety code. So the food safety code that's relevant for your category, food sector category. And so those audits are GFSI benchmarks. Though SQF food safety codes are SQF benchmarked. After you've got food safety certification, SQF has a food safety code that people sometimes like to progress to.
Okay.
So completely separate.
Okay. Excuse me. Bernard, if no validation on ready-to-heat products, is that a non-conformance, and which?
Ready-to-heat products, you should have validated that the micro is acceptable after you've heated it, if you've given heating instructions. So it would be on cooking instructions, typically. Yeah.
Okay. Damien, what are the mandatory SQF system elements required for food safety compliance?
All right. I could look that up for you, but it's in the SQF code. It tends to be management responsibility, food safety plan, internal audits. Let's see what else there is. Management responsibility, management review, complaint management, food safety management, document control, records, approved supplier program, food legislation, good manufacturing practices, food safety plan, product release, validation and effectiveness, verification activities, corrective and preventive action, internal audits and inspections, product identification, product trace, product withdrawal and recall, food defence plan, food fraud, allergen management, and training program. Yes, sorry, my memory isn't what it used to be. I do have to look things up these days.
That's
It's quite a
doing
list
all right,
anyway.
Olu Wadon Sin, what is the most effective means of sanitation and disinfection after cleaning food contact surfaces?
Right, different people, it varies, but I quite like peroxyacetic acid because it basically breaks down and doesn't leave a residue. People use traditionally people use chlorine, which is cheap and cheerful, but you need to rinse typically after chlorine. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Aman. Is there any standards for environmental monitoring for RTE frozen foods manufacturing?
Generally, people set their own standards requirements based on validating the plant and equipment when they establish the production. So originally, so I don't know offhand, but I don't know anybody that dictates standards other than really you want an absence of pathogens. Yeah. So if you've got a frozen, ready-to-eat product, then it should be similar to a fresh one. You don't want any pathogens, and you need to establish your level of indicator organisms if you're using them.
Okay, thanks. Question from Kamal: what parameters to be tested for paneer cheese in terms of food safety?
Cheese is usually yeast and molds and E. coli. Possibly salmonella, any other type of pathogens that fall into like entero groups, I guess. Yeast and molds, not just because of quality, but can produce toxins.
Okay. Amanjot is asking, what tests are required for water testing in ready-to-eat industry?
Is this water supply or is it water as an ingredient? But again, it would be typically the same sort of indicator organisms, total count, yeast and molds, enterobacteriaceae. With water supply, there'll be other tests like chemical tests that your supplier should do for you if you're getting supplied water by, for example, by mains. There should also be cryptosporidium, which isn't killed by chlorination.
Okay. Question from Casey. I'm involved with talent management. Are there any non-conformances with training that are common?
Well, I think a lot of the time people get caught out by not doing annual assessments with their staff and refresher training. So I think missing out training in the first place, but not just because somebody's been somewhere for 10 years, not reviewing their training and ensuring they're either validating their competency or giving them refresher training. Or, sorry, there's other things. There's things like not verifying the effectiveness of training. That would be important. And some standards like you to hold a copy of the training materials as well. So that's another possible.
Okay. Sai is asking, is internal environmental monitoring acceptable in-house?
Yes. Yes, it is, and it's usually cheaper than sending samples out. But what you do need to do is, if you've got pathogen testing on site, you need to ensure you've got adequate control of your lab as per ISO 17025, and your lab should not be anywhere in the building or anywhere near product areas. It should be if you're testing pathogens, it should be in a separate building and adequately controlled.
Right. Question from Atil, long one. With this inquiry, I do not want to accuse anyone. Although it is written in accreditation standards that CBs need to be independent when auditing, since the client is paying, with respect to the NCs published, what do you think if these are real NCs versus pretended audit NCs? Because as you also presented, nearly 33% of the recalls are due to the wrong allergen labelling. However, we can not see too much NCs related with labelling from the private schemes from these NCs. Do we need to rely on the results of these audits?
I think the certification themselves, audits themselves, are a massive step forward for the industry. You can always improve, and clearly there are areas that need to be addressed, but I wouldn't say that means that because they haven't been picked up on a certification audit. I think it would be a bit unfair to start accusing certification bodies of pretending that everything's okay, because I don't think that's true. I think it's a case of they just need to make sure that people have robust systems for product development, robust allergen management systems, robust product labeling, robust checks for product labeling, and similarly robust controls for environmental monitoring.
Okay.
Sorry, and the other thing with that is supplier assurance, so ensuring that you are getting what you expect from the supplier, and it isn't containing any allergens. What you're buying isn't containing any allergens that you're not expecting. So supplier assurance and management is in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
A question from Bernard on food safety culture again. What's the minimum you can implement that will, not result in a non-conformance?
Well, I don't know what the minimum is, but for me, it just needs to be led. This needs to be led from the top, and senior management team need to be leading this. This is the way we do things here, and that needs to be cascaded all the way down to the shop floor. And so the policies and objectives need to be communicated to staff, and the minimum is that all staff are aware of their contribution to a food safety culture and their responsibilities, and can answer those questions when asked what is their part of the whole food safety culture.
Okay. Beverly, what is expected for Listeria standard? NIH has suggestions, but is there any set standard for food?
Absent of Listeria monocytogenes. I think it's quite clear. There's no safe level of Listeria monocytogenes as far as I'm concerned. There's no safe level of Salmonella.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Bataillon. How can we control yeast and molds, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, enterococci in water line purification facility?
I think that probably chlorination would be the cheapest way, but it might be that you could treat it with UV, or possibly some sort of ultrafiltration.
Okay. Question from Rebecca. The following statement is a non-conformance. Equipment is visually verified to be free of product residue. Allergen-specific swabs are not used after cleaning, but labels of similar products state that the product is produced on shared equipment with tree nuts.
Yeah.
So that's
this is a question, and Rebecca, I think it would depend on the auditor, because I don't like this declaration because it means in generally legislation and standards, they say you shouldn't use disclaimers if you've done if you made every effort you need to make every effort to prevent cross-contamination of this allergen, tree nuts, before you start putting it on the label. So it could very well be declared a non-conformance. It might depend on the auditor, but that's what the expectation in the food industry is. You make every effort to prevent cross-contamination before you put may contains on a label.
Okay, got you. Nathan, FSSC 22 version 6.2 and SQF 10 are the main changes based around traceability, especially in the waste purge rendering waste.
The FSSC 22000, the main changes previously were around waste and quality control. SQF 10, we're not sure what the main changes are, but we've already talked about those and said food safety, culture, other items, equipment specified. Can't remember what else there was, but yeah.
Okay. Question from Andrea. I've always had challenge with my questionnaires in management commitment. What does other facilities do other than questionnaires to fulfill the standard? So what can be done related to management commitment apart from using questionnaires?
It is staff questionnaires, interviews, surveys, suggestion schemes, whistleblower schemes, exit interviews, team briefings, yeah, that type of thing.
Okay. Question from that's a one. What are the requirements for traceability system?
Well, for a traceability system, you need to start from your supplier and the raw materials you buy from the supplier. You need to record the raw materials as they come in storage, through the process, through processing, manufacturing, the packaging you use, the batch mixes, to the final product, secondary packaging, into storage, distribution, numbers, product, and customer. So your whole traceability system needs to follow through your whole process.
Okay.
Sorry,
question from Mitchell.
Sorry, I just add something to that before I do this.
Sure.
Sorry. Yeah. Also, with your finished product, you need to have batch traceability with it. So you're not just tracing from raw materials to customer. You're also tracing your product as you produce it. So maybe by, use by, or best before date. Might put the line on there. You might have other specific codes to identify that specific batch on that date. Sorry about that. Okay.
That's fine. Question from Mitchell. As an auditor, do you accept 1 point lessons in lieu of procedures readily available as proof of training?
Has it been signed off? I think if it's something that's been signed off and you've got evidence of it, and if the auditor asks if the external auditor asks the internal person questions and they show they're competent, then that should be fine. But it's something you need to have evidence of the training.
Okay, it's clear. Bernard, question from Bernard on ready to heat cooking instructions must be validated. Look, if they work, so if no validation, does that result in non-conformance?
We had a similar question before. I think, yeah, they need to be validated, don't they? Ready to heat, ready to eat.
Okay. Question from Rex. if not costly for an organisation to have in place ISO 9001, FS 22000 SQF, it is not redundant. If you were to advise, how do you convince management to adopt this now?
Okay, well, how would I persuade management? Because in the past, I've justified it. I've worked at sites where we had 1 to 2 audits a week, so 50 to 100 audits a week. We had one big site I worked at, and now these sites are probably getting maybe 10 audits. So you can justify it solely on based on having a GFSI benchmark certification. You can justify the reduction in time and effort in the amount of customer audits you have. So certification should pay for itself many times over. It's not just from that perspective, but from a site improvement and site food safety management system improvement.
Okay, question from Nathan. Also, could you share your thoughts on the current status of the elimination of the committees, the National Advisory Committee on Microbiological Criteria for Foods and the National Advisory Committee on Meat and Poultry Inspection?
Well, they provide a lot of good advice, but I don't get into politics, Nathan. We're not into politics here.
Okay, but you think
they're very useful and produce lots of good advice, yes.
Okay, Ritu, if a major non-conformance or on infrastructure change needs more time to be closed, can the auditor close this basis on the plan rather than the implementation?
This crops up quite a few times on the IFSQM forums, and I think what typically you've got to submit your evidence of a corrective action to a non-conformance within 30 days, and sometimes if it's like infrastructure improvement, it's impossible to do that. And so what we generally advise is to have an order or evidence of a financial commitment or a commitment to actually carry the work out. So a purchase order or a deposit on the work and a description of the work that's going to be carried out.
Okay. Question from Joanne. Best method to perform an accuracy test of IR temp guns, and how do you account for differences when there's a small window for refrigerated items when temp guns generally have accuracy of +=2?
It's quite difficult to test the accuracy, but obviously you are a national physics calibrated laboratory calibrated thermometer, and you want to check the IR gun against a reading on that thermometer and cross-check it. So, like any calibration, but you'd cross-check it against a national physics laboratory calibrated thermometer. But these IR guns, they don't tend to be the most accurate, so don't expect them to be consistently accurate to the 10th of a degree. Certainly, if you're going to reject something, you should check the product temperature with a physical thermometer rather than relying on the gun. Sorry, Simon.
No problem. Question from Teresa. What's the best way to manage the management requirements when you have multiple manager changes within a short period of time? Specifically, how long are we allowed to get all the management up to date on requirements and reviews? Can we utilize the backup designations in our organization chart to bridge the gaps until all are fully onboarded?
Well, that's quite a good idea, Teresa, to use the backup designations. To get people on board, you need to brief them and make them perfectly clear of their responsibilities. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using the designated nominees to help and assist with the management. There's nothing wrong with that. That's quite proactive. Excuse me. And if I was an auditor coming in and seeing that, I would think that was a good thing. So I don't see it as a negative.
No. Crystal, can you use another method for cleaning blood other than 1 to 10 bleach solution and rinsing with water? Is 70% isopropanol acceptable? We don't want to use water or store bleach on the production floor to be mixed as needed.
I'm going to make a confession, and I'm like a sodium hydroxide and chlorine man, generally, which are basic commodities. So the best people to talk about to go cleaning is your chemical suppliers, if you've got one, or get in touch with a chemical supplier and ask them what's best for your application.
Okay, brilliant. Right, well, we're 2 minutes over. That was the last question. There was some duplicates, but I've not brought them forward. So Nathan just said, thank you, Tony, for your wealth of knowledge. Excited to find out SQF 10 improvements to food safety. So do you want to mention about the offer we've got for the SQF? Okay. There you go.
Well, we offer SQF, amongst others, implementation packages, which include document templates, training, other guides, and information and technical support from myself until you achieve certification. And we're offering 15% off with that code currently, which is in the offers tab.
So how many have we? How many customers have we had over the years, Tony? How many years have we been doing this, and how many customers have we had?
We're coming up to 16 years, and we've had around 100 a year. So we're coming up to around 1,500 over the years. When you click on and go to the website, there's a product brochure there which will give you full details of the contents of the package.
Okay. If you are considering a new implementation and trying to convince your owners, it's a bit of a, you're struggling, this is more of a fast track, and it does come with support from Tony as well, which is invaluable. So we'll include this in the follow-up email as well. So we'll follow up with the recording, the slides, this link to this offer and the discount code, and your certificate, which you can also grab now if you want to print and sign that and keep it. It's been a great session. Thanks for all questions, so many questions. So it's been great. Thank you,
good.
Tony.
It's nice to have plenty of questions. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Okay. Enjoy your day, everybody. Bye-bye. Thanks, Tony.